What up? What up? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. On this podcast, we love to talk about crowdfunding. I publish this on Spotify, on iTunes, on YouTube, and wherever it is in the world that you're listening to this. I want you to know that there is a success story on this podcast, literally for everyone. I have worked so freaking hard to have an amalgamation. That's a great vocabulary, right? An amalgamation of many different guests on this show from all over the world. People from many different types of product categories, people from very different ages. I think the youngest guest we've ever had on is around 16 years old. I think the oldest we've had is around 75, maybe 80 years old doing their campaign. We've had people, men and women. We've had people in physical products, tabletops, games. We've had people in novels, films, theater projects, many different styles of creators. And what I really tried to document with this show when I started in 2015 was that I want to prove to you that this is possible. My first thing is that if you take nothing else away from today's episode, that this is possible, man, that would make me so incredibly happy. The second big thing is that I want you to understand the strategy, the tactics, the nuts and bolts, what you actually got to do to get a project off the ground. And particularly when it comes to doing a Kickstarter campaign, a crowdfunding campaign, how do you raise funds? How do you get backers? How do you promote this to strangers? How do you get people rushing in for a flood of orders, right, that you then fulfill when it comes to this campaign? So I think today's episode is actually an incredible example of how anyone out there can design a product, can create something new, and can bring this into the real world. If you've ever had an idea that you want to turn into reality, I think you should perk your ears up, particularly for this episode, because we talked with an incredible designer who's not launched one, but has actually created 6 Kickstarter campaigns for a variety of different products. In addition, one of the cool things about this campaign, not only the fact that it's a really freaking cool looking product, it's called an adjustable hourglass, it's a focus timer, but also has already attracted more than 2,200 people for more than $189K, which has been raised thus far with the campaign. It is still freaking ongoing, right? So you never know how high this thing is gonna go. So I think that first of all, from today's episode, you're going to take away a lot when it comes to creating a product. How do you think of something that's unique? How do you design something that people want to own? And how do you think about this in a way where it's not just like the next kind of product, but it's really something that's like so mind-blowing, so unique, so interesting that people are like stark craving mad, wanting to own this, wanting to back it, wanting to buy it, wanting to be like, hey, just take my money, right? When it comes to this campaign. So I think you're going to really take away a lot when it comes to that. In addition, you're going to learn a lot about the actual Kickstarter ecosystem, what you have to do in order to get funding from someone who's done a bunch of other campaigns. I think it's now 6 in total. What do you have to do in order to stand out, to get funding, to get backers, to get people actually coming to your page, taking action, sharing this thing, almost going viral? These are the different things that you're going to learn on today's podcast. In addition, I have so many archives. Go and check out some of my archives, but I'd love to produce these episodes for you. However, one of the biggest complaints I get is like, hey, Sal, I know that you love this. I know you're passionate about this, but dude, I just do not have this amount of time every single day to be listening to these podcasts. And I completely understand that, right? You're a busy guy. Maybe you also run another business or something like that, or you got to deal with things in the family life, or you got to be doing other things with your time. Maybe you got a 9-to-5 job as well, right? Whatever it is, I understand that you can't always listen to podcasts. So I have 2 solutions for you if you really want to speed up your learning when it comes to launching a crowdfunding campaign. The first is that I got an incredible book, an incredible resource for you called the Kickstarter Launch Formula. This thing is like my baby. I've poured my heart and soul, my blood, sweat, and tears. These are lessons from the trenches, and really it goes step by step through what you got to do in order to launch and really blow past your goal on Kickstarter. This is a formula which I have documented in that book, and you can very easily take all this hard-won information. It might take you years to learn or uncover. You can literally listen to this thing with me passionately reading this via Audible. So go and check this out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. Other people have already invented the wheel. You don't got to reinvent the thing, man. In addition, making me crack up here. In addition, dude, I got another great resource for you, a free course, which again is really meant to be paced, but also get you up quickly when it comes to the speed of actually launching a campaign. You can go to this course I'm about to mention. It's free. Enter your name and email, and you will start getting some communications from me. Go to this link at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. Crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter will take you there, and you can begin to speed up the process of actually learning how to do one of these campaigns. Final thing I want to mention, let's jump right into the podcast, is that this is a repeatable process. This is a system. This is something where you can come back to this again and again and again, just like today's guest. So let's cut to the chase. Let's learn how this individual raised over $198,000 on Kickstarter for more than 2,200 backers, and it's coming up right after this. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. We have a successful campaigner on the show, having attracted more than $166K in funding and also from more than 1,900 backers. This is for Focus Timer, an adjustable hourglass, minimalistic timer that boosts productivity and enhances creative flow. And we are lucky enough to have the man today on the podcast. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Salvador.
Definitely, man. If you can kind of get started, you can just describe a little bit of your product and what it does for those who are not looking at this at home.
Yeah, it's basically an adjustable hourglass, and it uses an accelerometer to set the time by twisting it in space, and that lights up a series of LED lights that kind of, it almost acts as like digital sand. So you can change the amount of time that it will count off for. And then when you flip it over, it lets out a nice like chime sound that starts the time going, and you can view the time as it's going down, like as an ambient display. And then once it's done, it lets out another chime. So pretty simple as far as the experience goes. And there's some complexity happen to make it that simple, but yeah, that's the product.
So I know that you've done a couple different campaigns here. How do you view yourself? Are you a creator, a designer, a marketer? How do you view yourself?
I'm primarily a designer, and that's really my background. I went to school for industrial design, and then being in Silicon Valley, that's my work career quickly shifted into digital sort of interaction design stuff. But I always kind of had product design as a core interest, and then the marketing, the e-commerce, that all kind of just built little by little as out of necessity, just to try to figure out how best to sell things.
For you, is it that you typically see a problem in the world? Do you see a concept you really like? Is it something you're itching to do and like reinvent a product? Like, where do your inspiration usually come from?
Yeah, I mean, so far it really has come from things that I wanted and wasn't able to find something that really matched what I wanted to do with it, primarily functionally. So my main product that I started with was a wallet made from Tyvek. And the key problem with that was it was when the iPhone sort of came out and people started to carry a phone, and the phone was bigger, and I was trying to carry it in my front pocket. And then I had also already transitioned to having a wallet in my front pocket. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to carry the wallet and the iPhone ideally in the same pocket, and wallets were just way too thick. So that's where I had been familiar with the material Tyvek, and it sort of came together where, hey, that would be something that I could make something really thin out of. So that was the impetus for the first product. Mm-hmm. And then similarly, the Focus Timer came out of, I've been practicing time blocking, where you set aside a specific amount of time to work on a particular task. I've been doing that for a long time, over 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so I just always came back to not having a good way to track that time.
Yeah.
And that concept or that problem sort of stuck with me for a while. And then a couple of years ago is when I really started to kind of tackle that head on.
We all need a little bit of help with that too, I think.
Yeah. Distraction has just become more and more of an issue in our society. So the need for it has just just been growing.
100%. It's so endemic, right? Also, side note, I think I might have owned your product at one point with the Tyvek wallet, because that sounds extremely familiar. And this was around 2013, right? I'm not sure if I ever backed your campaign or something, but I do remember owning a Tyvek wallet from Kickstarter. Could have been yours.
Yeah, if it had stitching, it was most likely mine.
That's wild,
But
man. That's
yeah,
insane.
yeah.
So cool. Tell me a tiny bit about like your history with Kickstarter, because I know you can kind of doing your own things and then coming back to the platform occasionally. What's your history been like with the platform?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I almost did a Kickstarter because before there was Kickstarter, sort of by accident, because while I had developed the wallet, I didn't really have a way to sell it. It was really a side project. It wasn't a company. I wouldn't even call it a product. It was like a project, just something that I had made. And as it turned out, I had to kind of do a manufacturing run to make it how I wanted it. And so I had a lot of these wallets just kind of available. And at the time I just listed it on Etsy once I heard about Etsy, and it was sitting there for a long time. And all of a sudden, just like a bunch of orders started coming in. And it turned out that it had been featured on some blog. And the way Etsy works is you have to kind of say how many you have and list them sort of one at a time or five at a time. And they just kept selling out like immediately when I would list it. So I started doing like 100 at a time. And
that's a lot to make and like to plan and all that.
Well, yeah. So I had, at the time I had already printed that many, but I didn't have a reliable way to sew them necessarily. I mean, I was sewing them with just a seamstress who was kind of doing it on the side. And so I was like, well, I think I can figure out a way to sew more of these if I can sell one. So, and you could put on there just manually, like when the delivery date is. So I started just essentially running it like a Kickstarter pre-order. I was like, okay, well, it's going to be a month, and then it's going to be like 2 months. And then long story short, we sold, I think it was about 3,000 wallets in 4 or 5 days.
Mind blown. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just like the taste of what e-commerce and sort of a Kickstarter type of a model could be. So then once I learned about what Kickstarter was later in 2013, I listed my first project, which was a follow-up to the first wallet. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I mean, that exploded. I mean, you got like more than 5,000 people with that one. Subsequent ones, I think you did like 3K, a couple of thousand with your other one. So you really did tap into something there for sure.
Yeah. From there on, it sort of became the initial place where I would launch major new products. So a year following that first one, we did a campaign for the soft shell wallet. And, meanwhile, I had the e-commerce site going on behind the scenes. And I was also working full time for all the way up until 2016. I had a full-time career still going as an interaction designer.
Busy man.
Yeah.
So I guess your days would kind of look like going to work, and then nights and weekends you were spending on your hobby, which was turning into your passion and ultimately what you kind of were doing, right? Which was e-commerce.
Yeah, exactly. And it actually kind of comes back to time blocking, because that was the way I was able to sort of manage both of those things. I didn't do most of it in a frenzy. I would dedicate an hour before work and an hour after work every day. And then usually some on weekends as well, especially if I had a particular project I was working on. And that kind of space gave me the time to think about things while I was away from it. So like a lot of times it would be, I was learning to sew at the time. So that could be a project, and I'd like make a prototype and then carry it around for a day. And then like the next night, make another prototype. So the time blocking was kind of the core of what allowed me to do that. And that kind of led to then later the interest in creating a tool specifically designed to support that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting, and being more effective with your time allows you to get done more in less time. So when it comes to these products, how long are you typically working on a new product before it really comes and sees the light with Kickstarter? Is that like a year, 2 years? How long does it usually take you?
It's been typically between a year and 2 years for each main product. And part of it depends on if it's an iteration of something that I already know how to do, or if I need to learn something new in order to make it. For example, I got interested in bags. Again, I couldn't find a bag, like a backpack that I was really, that I really liked. I actually asked for a backpack for Christmas one year from my wife. And she was like, yeah, sure. She knows I'm particular. So she was like, just send me a link.
Oh, she must hate you when it comes to gifts.
Oh, like buying me something is a task. So she was just, yeah, buy any backpack you want, just send me a link and I'll get it. And I really couldn't find one. Even the one that I had, I was actually pretty happy with. It was a Toomey and it was pretty good. But when I looked at the latest designs from Toomey, like that one had been discontinued. It was really like minimalist and more streamlined, and all of the newer ones were heavier, had more sort of like decoration on them and logos. And anyway, I was like, all right, I guess I got to make one. And so that one took long.
That's like anytime you need someone's getting you a gift, it's like, you know what? Got to make it.
It really is. And it's, I'm not really looking, oftentimes I feel more like I'm not looking for new products to make. I'm trying to find reasons not to make particular things. I'm like, I really want to find one out there because I know that it's a long journey.
For sure.
If I make it. So
one question as a follow-up while we're on the product side is, so there's different stages, right? There's like sketching something out, making a model, a visual in some way, CAD renderings, right? Then you go to prototype. Where do you find you spend the most time? In which stage do you find?
That's interesting. I think time-wise, it takes the most time to finalize something. Like I sometimes feel like I have a concept and a direction. I can narrow that down or have something that I'm pretty happy with. But then at the time, it doesn't feel like I'm that far from being done. But when it gets to actually like making the prototypes to where it's something where I feel like, oh, this is something that is like sellable or like I'm like is manufacturable. In terms of time, that does tend to take the longest. Yeah.
And I imagine also a lot of user testing and feedback and trying it out. I imagine with this product in particular, there's a ton of testing, right, that went into it.
There was. This is an interesting one because user testing is a little bit difficult depending on what you have to be able to show the person. And there's a certain amount of sort of just interview testing you can do, just discussion about user needs, problems people are having. And I did hear kind of anecdotally that people were interested in time blocking. But to be honest, in conversations, I didn't hear people saying things like, oh, I wish there were a timer
that would do this.
Help me with this. Or I heard actually somewhat more of the opposite, where it was like, well, I use my phone and it kind of works okay for me. Or
there's an app or something. Yeah.
If there's an app, and then like pretty deep into the project, actually, I even learned of people, oh, there's just a YouTube video that you watch that's a certain amount of time. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess that kind of does make sense. But so this one is a little bit of an odd one because I had a concept in my head of what this thing could feel like to use. And that's what I was trying to create, as it was the experience of this. And it was hard to get to that point technically where I could show someone what that experience would be like. Yeah. So I would be kind of like, when I would describe it early on, it was honestly pretty hard to convey. And that was even a challenge with how to create this story and this video, because I wanted to convey the experience of what it was like to use it. And it was not necessarily delving super deep into the features.
For most beginning creators that do have ideas and they want to turn them into something real, do you feel like they tend to get stuck in the CAD stage? Do they get stuck when it comes to the prototype? Do you think they just don't even get started? Where do you feel like most people get stuck when it comes to bringing a product into the world?
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends a lot on the product and the background of the person. I guess it's probably trying to think of too many things at once, like the marketing of it, the focusing on maybe the Kickstarter aspect or
the features, what to include, what not to.
Yeah. I mean, at least for me, I think focusing on the product first. I mean, not to the exclusion of figuring out how to sell it, but that's what tends to work best for me. I guess one thing that I have seen happen is people maybe keep it private too long. So they don't want people to steal their idea, or it's sensitive to share what your idea is. And that could be an area where people might get hung up. So it's not necessarily about a specific thing. It's about talking to people and being willing to share, and even sharing your story of how you're creating the thing, and building the audience around the creation process instead of separating it out. And that way you also get some course correction. If people have suggestions, it's much easier to make those changes earlier on.
I think that's so interesting the way you put it, because a lot of people think like, oh, I'm going to unveil this someday, and then like everyone sees all my hard work. But it sounds like you incorporate people into the actual development, design, iteration kind of process. You're building it with them almost.
Yeah, and it's really easy to do with the everyday carry products, because I do a lot of the customer service myself as well. I do have another person that does the primary sort of like shipping address changes and things like that. But then any product suggestions will oftentimes turn into a conversation. Like in our Zendesk, they get put over to me. And so we sort of engage in a like I'm working on a passport wallet now. And I've had, lots of conversations with people around what they're trying to do with that. My second product came out of the first product was a little bit large, and then they wanted a smaller version. I got lots of different feedback about which sort of things people might want. But yeah, if you're creating something for the first time as well, those conversations, you can find a way to make the conversations happen. Even just going to like a Starbucks, and if you have something to show, I think it helps. Yeah. Even if it's a simple mock-up, people like to be able to look at something. It kind of facilitates a conversation even.
It's a lot of fun.
It almost doesn't matter what it is. It's just that if you're going to get better feedback. And then if they comment on something specific about the craftsmanship of your thing, you can take that with a grain of salt. And it'll get better in that regard, but they'll probably say something else interesting about how they would use it. And those are the types of things that I think to zero in on is the usage, the problems, things like that.
At this point in your career, having done this several times, gone through the process, right? You understand kind of the magic behind it in the process. Do you still feel anxious and nervous before you really hit the launch button and have this go live to potentially thousands of people?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's very nerve-wracking, especially with this product. I honestly, in early indications were that it was not going to do that well. I mean, it was pretty niche. It was pretty expensive for what it is. And I'm not even getting that as good of margins on it as I probably should. But for this particular one, I was just like, well, it's something I want to make. And I was kind of committed to just making it and seeing, which is probably not what I'd recommend in general. But yeah, I take a screenshot of the green launch button every time before I go. And sometimes I'll message it to some other Kickstarter creator and just like, oh, here it is. And they're just
Dave's on to another project again, another product coming out.
Yeah, it's on.
Cool, man. So, I mean, before we get into your success here, and I want to just talk a tiny bit about that, is one of the things you mentioned in our pre-interview is just the difficulty of building up an audience before you go live. And yet you seem to have had some great success here. So I was kind of curious what you meant by that, by that point.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what happens is some people view Kickstarter as an audience, and it's like a stage where you are going to get on there and show your product. And then if you get enough applause, that's sort of like dollars that are going to come to you. But I think what you have to imagine is that like, it's like a stage, but there's no audience there. Like Kickstarter is like the auditorium, and there's some audience, but it's more like it's going to amplify whatever audience you bring to it. So I guess it's more like you have to sell the tickets to your own show and get some people there. And then if some other people hear from outside the audience, like some outside the auditorium, some applause, they can be like, oh, what is that? I'm going to go check it out. So that's kind of where you can start to get some organic ranking and start to build the momentum. But in general, I think you need to have kind of some people already aware of what you're doing, interested in it, and ideally ready to support your project. And oftentimes the Kickstarter doesn't have to be so much about the product even. It can be the story of how you're creating the product and people that want to support it.
Another point looks like is you did have a lot of people though that within Kickstarter, within the ecosystem, seem to check it out, whether you call that referrals or I'm not sure the word you want to use there. It seems like you did have people who were interested in that way.
Yeah. So if you've done projects in the past, that will be those and done well and delivered those can be very, very powerful in terms of, I almost view that as you're bringing your own audience. Like it's sort of there in Kickstarter, but in fact, you will have already had those email addresses. You can message them. So in a way, those are now part of your list as well. And they'll get notifications inside of Kickstarter. So as you start doing multiple projects, that's almost the audience that you're bringing in a way. And Kickstarter, and then there'll be additional sort of new Kickstarter backers that are following those people as well. So like when they back, I think to a certain extent, other people will get notifications if they're being followed and things like that. Just from a first project launching, it's good to have some means of creating your own momentum.
For sure. So you go live with this and you hit that live button and you start to begin to surpass, it sounds like, your own expectations. When did you really feel like, okay, like we're kind of off to the races here. At least this is going a little bit better than I thought. When did you kind of feel that way?
Actually, it wasn't until like day 3, 4, or 5, something like that, because what I've seen in my projects, at least, and I think a lot of other creators, is that you do that initial push, you get your bump of the people that you brought. That's amplified by Kickstarter, and but things level off after. Sometimes it almost feels like that launch window is getting shorter and shorter. Like for a lot of projects, they'll run their best special, and it'll be kind of like first day they could be more than half of the total that they're going to get for the campaign. So for this one, it didn't really plateau as much in day 3, 4, 5. And so that's kind of when I saw that this was a little different. And I started to see some good conversion rates. So that was also an indicator.
It's beautiful, man. I think that's why, honestly. It looks so cool. It has a very minimalistic kind of a quality to it.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the video guys were that I used. I've used them on 3 other campaigns. And so we kind of know how to work together. And I think they did a really good job with making it look good, especially with LEDs. They're really hard to capture on film and video and photography. So it's actually kind of interesting. What I went with as a strategy on this campaign was just to use the video and pull stills from it. So everything you see on there are stills. I didn't do any additional photography session, because in projects past, I realized that I would usually do a photo session of something, but at the end of the day, I would end up using more of like the stills pulled from the video or GIFs or whatever. And so for this one, I just decided to only go with that. And that ended up working out to kind of convey the form and the use of it.
Yeah, video is really cool. I love all of the being able to kind of contrast it to like a traditional hourglass, and just seeing also I don't know if you call it calligraphy or what you were doing there with your painting. That was so cool to see some of those elements. So one question I had for you, just kind of as a follow up, is I think another way you stand out is you've gotten lots of great testimonials. Like you have people from Twitch that are saying nice things. You have people from Productivity Iced You have people from focused podcasts. How do you get these people to comment on this before it's really come out?
So for that, I actually got to the point where I could create working prototypes. And like I was saying before, it's a really difficult concept to convey. But once I got to the point, like I did some early testing and put everything together, and having it in your hand and like moving it it's just a compelling experience. Like we don't usually have objects that behave like that, because it's just like you just sort of twist it and it's just a one-to-one reaction that lights are going on and off. So once I kind of got to that point, I started to reach out to some of the people. I made a list of people who I thought might be interested in it, and were just kind of thought leaders in this space. And I just reached out to them and said, hey, I'm making this thing, and I thought you might be interested in it, and can I send you one? And so we got a pretty good response rate from that. And I did that with an earlier version for some people, and then as it started to get sort of nicer, a nicer, more polished version. And then to do that, I learned some like 3D printing, and to be able to we ended up making like 10 of a nice version that it's what's in the video. Like it looks pretty close to what the real one would be like.
Yeah.
And I was able to send those and just get them in people's hands. So they would use them for a little while and then send it back. And yeah, some of those folks were like, oh, I'm not that interested in it. And then by the time when they used it, they wrote back and they were genuinely excited about it.
I mean, that says a lot as well, I think, about the product. But I love the way that, you're just learning so many new skills. Like you're kind of doing what it takes, right, to really get these out there. And like whether it's learning sewing or 3D printing or marketing, you're kind of becoming like a jack of all trades, which is really interesting.
Yeah. It's much easier to learn those types of things, I think, when you have a specific project and even like a specific goal within that project.
Yeah, for sure.
So at one phase, I was trying to make 3D prints to sort of just make something work. And it didn't really matter that much how it looked. And I used one kind of 3D printer to do that. And I said, okay, well, now I want to be able to make some that look more realistic. And so I had to research. So starting with that end goal of like, I want to be able to send these to people or like use this in a video. So it's kind of like a dual path.
Yeah.
Like I want to have something that I could use in a video and use for beta testing, as well as sort of prove out the manufacturing, but I don't want to go all the way down the manufacturing road, so how can I do that? And so that's what working backwards led to sort of, okay, I need to do this other kind of 3D printing. And so, so that's sort of having a tangible goal and a tangible project, and then working backwards
makes it easier.
A good way to, And then at some point you can also learn, like as far as the coding, I got into it just a little bit, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to get to where I need to get to, So like,
takes
when to sort of, when to sort of raise the flag. Kind of, all right,
got to get help with this one. That's really interesting. So, you've had so many cool products. Where do you feel like you're going with this? Are you trying to build now a brand around this one? Are you going to continue to come out with really interesting products that kind of come to your mind? I don't know if you help as well when it comes to designing products for other people. Where do you see yourself going with this?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't know where this product itself would live, or what its future was. And that was part of going to Kickstarter and seeing what the response was. And from the momentum, I am more inclined to be able, I think it could potentially build itself as its own brand. And it could be somewhat complementary because like I do see some overlap with conceptually minimalism and trying to do things efficiently and time management and sort of productivity
is huge. Yeah, huge.
Yeah, so productivity is huge, and then it's a kind of a question of whether to incorporate slim folds, move that more into the productivity space, and then the timer is an element of that, or the timer is separate, or maybe some combination of both where, I don't know. I'm open to ideas.
Well, first of all, I mean, you're doing awesome. You're obviously killing it. Where can people go to learn more about your current product, the Focus Timer? Where can they go and check that?
So that would be over at getfocustimer.com. And as well as if you search on Kickstarter for Focus Timer, you can get to it, or slimfoldwallet.com. It's one of the items listed on there that'll lead you over.
Cool. Awesome. And on your question, I mean, just from hearing you in this interview, I mean, first of all, you're crazy and you're taking action and you're getting tons of results. You're putting things out there. You're learning new skills. So, I mean, kudos to that. That's incredible. I would say just from hearing you, I think that you're the kind of person that when you see something designed in a way you don't like you want to do it yourself, right? So I would think about what you're most passionate about and also what makes sense from the market size and all of that. But it's been great to have you on, man. I have a final question for you. Do you have any other points you want to get through? Other than that, I have a final question for you.
No, one thing I'll just throw out there is that if people are interested in to check out the book Story Brand by Donald Miller. And I think that's been something that can help people think about product development and the story behind the products. Because I think a lot of times you come down to the features and then you want to back out from that and get the benefits. But I think really kind of a lot of things that can drive conveying what an idea is really the story. And I think that book does a really good job of kind of outlining a specific framework to help you think through it. So I reread that pretty much with every project with that lens.
The Story Brand, right?
Yeah, it's called the Story Brand.
Story Brand. Okay, I'll be sure to check that out. Sounds very interesting. Awesome, man. Well, my final question for you is, and you can speak directly to the listeners. We have a lot of different types of people in the audience. You could end on either a word of encouragement. It could be a quote that you like. It could be a final tip, anything along those lines. And we can end on that note.
Sure. Yeah. I think you don't be afraid to make the leap. And by that, I mean, you don't have to actually make a leap in order to do the thing that you want to do. I think a lot of times people build it up to be that the only way to kind of do a project is to quit whatever they're doing or kind of take this huge entrepreneurial leap. I think things can also be accomplished with comfortable steps and in a consistent basis. So I'm trying to encourage that as an approach to at least consider.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dave. Really appreciate it. Great advice and look forward to your next campaign.
Thanks a lot, Salvador.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Welcome back, and thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope that you took a lot of value out of today's episode, particularly when it comes to creating a new product. What do you got to do to get that idea out there, to get people actually buying this thing, actually backing it, actually owning it around the world? What do you have to do in order for that vision to happen? I hope you took away at least a couple of nuggets of gold when it comes to doing that. And more specifically, launching a killer Kickstarter campaign, launching a campaign that actually gets funding, that gets people talking, that gets people backing. That's really our goal at the end of the day when it comes to this show. So I hope that you took that away. If you did and you feel like you want to kind of give us a pat on the back, make sure to leave a positive rating and review on iTunes. That would mean so much to me. In addition, I got another resource that I'm going to share with you. But before I do, just one other quick thing to mention, which is, dude, go and dive into the archives of this show. There are so many just nuggets of gold waiting to be discovered. There's so many weapons which you can add to your war chest when you're going out there into the trenches of crowdfunding and really trying to hit it big. So why not do that? Why not invest your time? Why not really sink your teeth into this? If you're going to be watching long episodes of what is Roku TV or Amazon Prime or HBO Max or whatever it is you're doing, why not also sink your teeth into something that's actually going to move your life forward? And that's the podcast episodes that I've really worked hard to get out there for free so you can actually go out there and you can learn as much as possible. All right, man. So if you really want to just get straight to it, for those people out there that are like, you know what, Sal, just cut to the chase. I want to know exactly what I want to do. I'm willing to actually be valued this. I'm willing to pay for this. I know that this is an investment, but I really want to get it from the best. And I want to make sure as well that I'm doing the right stuff, that if I'm launching a campaign, there aren't things that I'm forgetting about. If I'm doing a campaign, I know about all the resources that are at my disposal, people that I should be talking to, giving me feedback on my marketing materials, on my process as I'm going through this. Is Kickstarter even a good thing to do, or Indiegogo? If you're kind of one of those people and you're like, you know what, just cut to the chase, save my time, and I really believe in this, and if this is something that is going to make sense, then great, I want to go forward with doing a campaign. You should definitely look into my one-on-one coaching call option. So these are intensive coaching calls. I try to make myself available to my audience on an occasional basis. So I occasionally make these available where you can book a one-on-one coaching call with me. In addition, you can kind of think of this almost like a consulting session on steroids, right? This is really an in-depth coaching session where literally every single person I've had after that was like, wow, I was blown away. Just the literal value that you get within the first 10 minutes of doing this call is freaking insane. And it's because I bring my A game, I bring my best. I have a huge library of knowledge since 2012 of doing these different campaigns, of working with creators, of interviewing people, of really being just steeped in all of this knowledge. So why not take this all at your disposal and use that in order to have a powerful launch, in order to enhance your campaign, and to make sure that if you are going to be spending so much time on this, if you're going to be putting funds into getting a product made, that you're doing it right and you're checking all of those boxes. So if that sounds interesting to you, go to this link I'm about to mention. You can book a one-on-one intensive coaching call with me. The link is crowdcrux.com/coaching. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching. crowdcrux.com/coaching. Just go to that link, enter a little bit of information about your project, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. Tell me as much as you can, be thorough, right? So we can make good use of our time and you can get that call scheduled ASAP. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you next time.